Council President Don Pearson and council members, I'm Karen Bergsvik, the Human Services Manager for the City of Renton. I'm here along with Shannon Matson, the Chair of the Human Services Advisory Committee, and Linda Smith, the Vice Chair of the Human Services Advisory Committee, to go over the 2015 and 16 funding recommendations with you. Also in the audience is Diane Utak, the Human Services Coordinator, who provides all the technical assistance and the analysis as part of the funding recommendations. So we're going to share the presentation duties between the three of us. And Shannon's going to go ahead and start.
So thank you for allowing us to come and present to you today. I'm the Chair of the Human Services Advisory Committee, and it was our task, thank you, to review all the human services proposals submitted by human services agencies that serve Renton residents for this 2-year cycle. And so for the 2015-2016 funding process, we received 77 applications and reviewed, scored, and made funding recommendations based on a process that we'll describe. The total amount requested was just over $1 million this year, and so as you can see, we had about $533,000 to allocate, so it was a tough funding deliberation, and we were only able to fulfill about half of the requests that were made.
A great deal of work has gone into the funding recommendations before you. It really started last year with the committee members visiting the agencies that we funded in the last funding cycle and really taking the time to learn more about them. This year, they've spent over 3 months reading and rating the application, and those are the application notebooks in front of, as an example.
So Renton, we have participated in what's called the Common Application Form. It's a consortium of 18 cities came together to create some ease in the process for human services providers to apply to multiple cities, as many agencies serve multiple communities across our region. And so 18 cities use this same application. Renton is a participant in the Common Application Form. So the benefit, as I mentioned, is that it saves time to the agencies. There's some efficiency. They're able to put all of their requests in one place, and it also allows them to apply to many more communities than they would have if they had to submit an individual application to each city. It's also used for reporting and performance measures as we go through, as we have funded and are monitoring applications. So the first part of our process is as we receive applications, we sort them into what we call the Renton results. And so there are 7 key priorities for human services that we sort these applications into. So the first is all children and youth ready for educational success, work, and life. The second is individuals have adequate clothing, food, and health care. The third is that all individuals become as self-sufficient as possible. The fourth is residents know about domestic violence and how to keep safe. The fifth is all residents are proactive to issues of sexual assault and sexual violence. The sixth is end homelessness in Renton, and the eighth is connect people to services. And we roughly allocate some soft funding targets as we go through this process. Those are dictated based on past demand. So as we try and assess where we should be allocating funds to which of these results, as you can tell, they serve a broad array of issues in our community. We look to the our past and how much we have allocated to each of these historically based on the demand from human services providers in their applications.
Okay, so the committee spent a lot of time training ourselves on the tools that we had to use in rating so that we would be consistent in how we scored the application. The committee was split into 2 groups. I led one group and Shannon facilitated the other group. Each individual committee member rated each application based on a numerical rating tool that we use. After that, we came together, each subcommittee came together. We numerically assigned a score, and then that became a cumulative score. And after which we came together as a whole committee to review each of the application individually. So over the 3-month period of time, we put a lot of time into each application each member was familiar with each application in the package. So at that particular time, we had an opportunity to review any discrepancies or any inconsistencies or any difference of opinion to come to a consensus on how we rated the application. We scored the application based on what was on the application. One of the things that we really was focused on is not bringing in personal information, because that would have been a disadvantage to agencies that applied where no one knew anything about them. So we believe that we were very consistent in that process. So prior to our rating, we talked about ground rules. A lot of our ground rules were direct results of our work the year before. So we had a minimum. Each agency could ask for a $5,000 minimum. Maximum for any new program was $7,500. We had to fund the agency in rank order without skipping them. So an agency that may have been funded before, if it didn't appear in the rank order, we used the rank order process, and we believe that was a fair process. There are no changes in the funding process that we're making at this time. As in prior processes, we go back and we tweak and see if there's anything that we need to do to make the next process more even better than what this one was. So, but we do believe that we were consistent, we believe that we were fair, and we believe that all of the agencies receive a consistent review based on what they submitted to us. We did a lot of work in terms of assisting the agency. Every agency had an opportunity to attend a workshop, and those workshops were offered for the agency staff. We also provided one-on-one assistance to agencies. Review of application, they had an opportunity for their application to be reviewed prior to submission of their application, and the staff was available to help the agency write application. So we believe that that was, really important for us as a committee, as we were focused on helping agencies to provide the best application possible. Some took advantage of the help and others did not.
So we come to you with our funding recommendations. If you see the attachment labeled City of Renton Human Services Funding Recommendations for 2015-2016, I want to underscore that obviously the needs exceeded available funding, and so there were scarce resources for how much demand for human service support we needed in our community based on these applications. And if you, just to give you kind of the outline here, these are divided into each Renton result area. The agency is listed, the program that they advanced, the 2014 award, if they received one, the requested total amount, and then the recommendation of the committee for funding. And so through the deliberation process, these agencies were rank ordered based on our score, and then we vetted this, we went through a pretty rigorous process for trying to allocate scarce resources across these different agencies. One thing that we noted this year, different than prior years, is that while we created this rigorous, fair process for applying, we noticed that many small organizations, what we might consider grassroots organizations, organizations that had small agency budgets or were largely run by volunteers, seemed to be really disadvantaged in this process, meaning that they just didn't rank very well in terms of their application. And this is because they don't have grant writers on staff by their very nature. They address the needs of their community. And so while we feel like this was a fair process and everybody was given equal opportunity and access to support, we were concerned to see that a number of agencies were unfunded, and these are agencies that provide critical support services to our organization. Also of note is that this became a more competitive process. We had 8 new agencies that were funded which means when you have the same pool of funds to allocate, some agencies are going to be defunded. In fact, 10 agencies that that had previously been funded by the City of Renton are no longer being funded in this recommendation schema. So we come to you with a request as well as some recommendations. And as we looked at this, we'd like to advance the request. And if you look at Human Services Advisory Committee proposal for City of Renton Human Services 2015, our committee talked long and hard about what are the characteristics of the agencies that made it so that maybe they didn't put their best foot forward or didn't have the resources to put their best foot forward, but really deserve support in the work that they do in our community. And so we identified some criteria that maybe help identify some common characteristics of these agencies. One is that they had 2 or fewer full-time equivalent employees, so small staffs. They had less than a $200,000 annual budget, largely ran off volunteer resources, and that they had a focus on essential services in Renton, like housing, youth, food services, particularly food services programs here. And 6 agencies came out who submitted funding proposals but did not make the cut in terms of able to compete within this process. So Cry Out, Margie Williams Helping Hand Center, Renton Meal Coalition, Renton Youth Advocacy, Somali Youth, and Way Back In. And some of these agencies have been agencies that we funded in the past, others not. So our recommendation or our proposal is to provide a smaller award to these agencies over the next 2 years to continue to support them while we as a committee can provide some wraparound support services. We have a really talented committee. We're committed to making sure that these agencies have the resources they need to come forward in the next funding cycle with a really competitive proposal. So that's the commitment we've taken on, but we want to make sure that they have the resources to sustain until then. And so we're asking for $48,000 over 2 years in addition to the $533,000 that are already allocated for human services funding. And this would provide $4,000 a year per agency on this list. And again, as we move forward with looking at the process for funding, we're going to be deliberate as a committee to understand how we might be able to work, provide a system that helps acknowledge this on the front end, and so that we can create a process around ensuring that these agencies have a better chance of funding in the future.
I think the only thing that I want to add to this particular area is that the agencies that we are recommending for this extra funding, I believe, are critical to meet the human services needs here in Renton. As you know, the human services needs are growing, and I think not to fund these agencies would really create a real crisis here in the city of Renton. And specifically, we're talking about youth, hunger and homelessness. So I think that's the discussion that we as a committee have really put a lot of thought into.
Mr. Chair,
That's great.
is that the end of the presentation?
First slide.
One more slide. At this time, the funding recommendations will be adopted as part of the budget process. We're not asking you to take any action tonight. It's just a briefing. And that the needs outweigh the available resources by almost double. So the committee had difficult decisions to make, and this is their recommendations to you. And they really want to support critical essential services provided by these small agencies. They also are looking forward to the next 2 years. We will have the housing and human services element done of the comprehensive plan. We're starting the human services strategic plan, and a piece of that will be a funding plan. So they'll be going through and pretty much changing the funding process almost from A to Z, I think, as a result of all those things going forward. So they're really looking to the challenge of the next 2 years. And they're available, and I'm available to answer any questions you have.
Great, go ahead.
Yes. Thank you, Karen. Thank you, Linda. Thank you, Shannon. Thank you. You know, I appreciate what you all are doing. I remember several years ago I participated in one of a series of workshops you had to try to train our human service agencies on how to write grants and how to even work together and do a combination of things, and I think that's good. So one of my questions is, and I got several of them, has there been any, and I know that they're able to apply for other grants and other, that are available with other agencies and funders. Do we have any knowledge of your training assisting any of these organizations obtain funding from other sources because of the training? That's one question. And then the other one is, I'm curious in terms of how much have we allocated over the past couple of years in 2012 and 13 in terms of dollars. This year we're doing 500, just a little bit over $500,000. What did we do the last couple of years? And you've already identified the need, and I like your process and how you have realized that there just isn't enough money to go around for all of the various agencies that are doing good work in our community, and you realize that we need to come and see if we can increase the funding offering, and I support that wholeheartedly. In fact, I would even wonder if we should take a look at our entire human services budget and figure out ways to find more money, as we have done in other areas. Our needs are expanding rapidly in this emerging city, and the South County cities are being hit hard, and we don't provide the level of services in the urban area, Seattle, because we're suburban. We don't get a lot of the federal dollars. They get 80% of that money. So we need to think in terms of increasing our funding. And I'd be delighted to have that conversation with my colleagues in terms of how we can figure out. The $48,000 is a drop in the bucket based on the need. You've already identified that the need is twice the amount of money that we're currently allocating. So I would encourage my colleagues to recognize that and to be thinking about having some conversation about this, because these organizations are doing some wonderful work for our residents. Now, aside from I know that written results targets on youth. The 7 results targets on youth, hunger, and homelessness. But I am of the mind, and I speak about this often at the Community Committee to End Homelessness meetings, that aside from housing units that we're focused on creating, we need to be thinking about how to get people to sustain their lives with income. And so there needs to be some kind of an economic development portion here. We can not only feed people, and help our youth and find people shelter, but we can help them earn money. That's going to be a big boost for our economy, local economy, in terms of tax revenue. So I would like for us to, however we can think about that, to make that a part of some conversations as we move forward as well. But thank you all for the work you're doing. You're doing some hard work. I have to be honest and say I'd hate to be in your shoes, because I know that you're not going to make everybody happy, and when you go through your processes, you're trying to spread peanut butter around, and everybody's not going to get some, and that's not good. So, as policymakers, I think we need to be thinking in terms of how do we increase the revenue for the human service funding cycle, so that we can provide the dollars that are going to make some meaningful benefit to our residents. Thank you.
Any other council? I would just like to add my thank you to you. This is a monumental task that you undertook, and I think you've done it with a lot of professionalism, a lot of heartfelt thinking, and it wasn't an easy task at all. I understand that. You only have to go down to the Center of Hope, like I do, and you see the need. So just want to say, add my thank you to it. The process now is this will go into the 2015-16 budget, and we'll see what the administration recommends, and then we can talk about it at that point. Marcy?
I just want to say I'm so impressed that you went to every single one of the agencies that we funded.
Not every.
No.
You visited them?
No, I'll clarify, sorry about that. Every other month, they went out and they did a group of agencies that we fund. And there was a selection process of the ones that we visited. But we went out and we visited over, I think, 15 agencies over the year. And then we also had agencies come to the meetings in the times that we had them at City Hall.
That, I mean, that's just above and beyond. Wow, thank you. Please pass it on to the whole committee. That's wonderful. I bet you felt like you learned a lot.
We did. It felt like we really created a relationship with the agencies. They got to know us. They know that we care about them, and
Right.
likewise, yes.
Mr. Chair?
Randy's next.
Yeah, I just wanted to jump in and affirm my agreement with all the comments that have been made, and to also add how much I appreciate the work that your committee's done. I know if I think back to, a decade or more ago during budget time at city, the city council was working on the budget, and I remember just the lion's share of comments and concerns were over the human services funding, and I think that the method we used was really kind of ad hoc then. It was kind of whoever came and presented the most and the loudest and called us the most would be eligible for funding, which is a terrible process, really. So this is a much better process, and I'm really interested in your comments about small agencies and maybe having difficulties with it. It's probably still better than the lobbying that they used to do, but I also agree that it could probably be improved. I did want to say to Mr. Taylor's comment that I agree. I wish there were more funds, and I know other jurisdictions like King County, what I remember was cutting way back to almost nothing. So I'm proud that we can at least have this much funding, and I wish there were more. And for people that aren't aware, I think if I remember right, some of the criteria we're using are, we look at sort of those items that are the responsibility of the city and the charter of the city, and I think that all of these agencies that are getting funding are basically doing some part of the work that the city might otherwise have to do, or they're alleviating the burden on counseling or criminal justice or something else. They're working in partnership with the city. So it is money well spent from the standpoint of the taxpayers often. The nonprofits that step in and take up some of these roles actually can really help us with advocacy and other things. So anyways, really appreciate it. Found your recommendations really helpful, and I thank you for the hard work.
Mr. Taylor?
Oh, just one last comment. The other thing, too, that I recognize is over the years how you have changed your internal culture that presents itself to our human service agencies as a group, staff who's looking for ways to try to say yes and try to create the kind of opportunities and the guidelines to accomplish that. I think that's important, and I can sense that just based on your thinking about how to fund agency or organizations that just couldn't make the mark. We just didn't want to leave them out there, but you're trying to figure out ways to do that, and I appreciate that.
Okay, seeing no more comments, again, I want to say thank you for coming, and the committee of the whole is adjourned, and we'll come back to the full council at 7 p.m.